Enjoy flying in economy class. You don't deserve to be near me or my team. My wife publicly humiliated me in front of her board. But she never imagined I held a secret legal clause that would erase all her company's patents within 72 hours. The jet engine roared behind me as the heat from the escape soaked my dress shirt. My wife was laughing out loud, one of those artificial, sharp laughs she reserves for her boardroom audience. That same boardroom was now climbing the steps of the company jet, clinging to branded gift bags and half-finished champagne glasses. I was holding a suitcase with no bag, no drink, no invitation, just a silent ultimatum between my fingers. Don't do this, I told her. No anger, no pleading, just the weight of it. She did not hesitate. She just spun on a heel with her sunglasses already on. Have fun flying, coach, she said as if it were the punchline of some inside joke I was not supposed to get. The kind of joke where you were the one left standing on the tarmac. The door closed with a hiss. It did not take off immediately. It stayed there almost as if they wanted me to hear the laughter filtering through the fuselage, to see the silhouettes, clinking glasses, arrogant shapes in tailored suits, toasting another quarter of dominance. I did not flinch. I just stood there as my tie flapped against my chest and the sun burned the crown of my head. I did not blink until the whine of the turbine faded into the horizon. Then I looked at my watch right on time. I took 3 steps back from the yellow line. I opened my phone and dialed. The line did not ring. It connected instantly. Activated, I said. There was a pause on the other end. Then a quiet voice answered, confirming. You authorized the resignation under Clause 14. Yes. Another pause. Understood. You are aware of the cascade effect this will trigger. I am counting on it. I hung up and turned towards the black car that had been waiting behind a nearby hangar. Its lights were already on. This is where I should probably tell you what I do, who I am, why the name EC. The name on their custom luggage tags only exists because of a ghost clause in a very old agreement. But the truth is, none of them ever asked. For years I played the part of the supportive spouse, the charming +1 at galas, the man in the corner who did something in consulting. When the paperwork was processed, my name did not appear, just an anonymous signatory through a trust that no one in the company cared to audit. Why? Why would they? I was just her husband. Now they would learn, but not with shouting, not with scandals, but with silence and signatures, through a few lines of text they glanced over years ago and a clause buried in the fine print. Clause 14. Before returning to the hotel, I took one last look at the sky. They would already be in the air toasting themselves, high-fiving over a successful presentation to another multinational, which would never know that its data infrastructure was now unstable. The funny thing is that none of this would have happened if she had simply treated me as if I mattered, if she had not tried to win in front of the board by publicly reducing me to nothing, not even with words, but by omission, by erasure. But she did, and now every time that jet climbs it runs on documentation that I have just made obsolete. By the way, if you are still listening, and you are the type of person who has ever been underestimated, ignored, or dismissed by someone who thought they had all the power, go ahead and follow. More than 90% of you listen without subscribing, but pressing that button really motivates my team to continue creating these stories. Anyway, back at the hotel, I changed my shirt, opened my laptop, and entered a one-time code from a black key fob. A simple control panel appeared. Resignation in process. I clicked confirm. The real fun had not yet begun. The hotel room was basic, walls bis, curtains base, bis. The kind of place meant for business travelers who do not ask questions and never stay long enough to notice the smell of recycled air in the carpet. I left the suitcase on the chair still closed. I did not bother to unpack. I just took out the laptop, an indescribable black plate with no brand, and placed it on the desk as if I were performing surgery. The screen flickered once, then required a retinal scan. A second later, a password request appeared. I wrote it slowly, deliberately, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to savor each keystroke. Each letter was another nail in the coffin of their perceived control. The control panel loaded. Bharat Chipe Holdings, a name that no one on the board had bothered to search for thoroughly on Google, much less audit. They thought it was an offshore legal formality, one of those shell companies that the rich used to evade taxes, and it was. But it was also the backbone of every patent on which they had built a product. Guess who wrote those patents? Not their current legal team. No, the hard-drinking Harvard graduate with the Bluetooth headset. Every product proposal, every quarterly projection, every brilliant article in WER or Fast Company was built on my phrases, my sentences, my clauses, but I never asked for public credit. I asked for protection, a firewall between me and the circus. She said she understood. Stay anonymous, stay safe. She used to say when she still thought I was the smartest man she knew. Now she thought I was luggage. I opened the Final Acts folder. Inside were 3 documents: a letter of resignation, a notification of activation of the cascading termination clause, and a file for the press. I selected all 3, dragged them to the encrypted upload field, paused, and then clicked send. The screen flickered. Status sent. Then I waited. It did not take long. About 47 minutes later, the first headline appeared on one of the smaller tech blogs. Key legal partner resigns from Viant Techapi Holdings. The post was brief, terse, citing anonymous sources and noting that a major invisible player had just disengaged from the company's foundational legal backbone. No name, no photos, but anyone who paid attention to Viant's rise would know the implications. I refreshed the page again. Now it was on 2 more blogs, then a tweet. I leaned back in the chair with no fists in the air, no monologue, just stillness. This was not about rage. Rage is messy, careless. Rage leaves fingerprints. This was about control, precision, consequence. I opened a private message from a disposable app and wrote a line to someone I had not spoken to in over a year. Phase 1 completed. Watch for secondary triggers. They replied with a single emoji. A chess horse. I closed the laptop. Somewhere, perhaps still in mid-flight, their champagne glass was probably half full. Perhaps they were talking about the next steps or making fun of the nervous compliance officer who had expressed concerns last year about licensing audits. And perhaps, if I had calculated it correctly, the notification about my resignation would arrive in their internal counsel's inboxes just as the plane taxied into a private hangar. I was in no hurry. She had handed me humiliation. I handed her the silent beginning of the systemic collapse clause by clause, just as I had written it. The jet reached cruising altitude, and the first wave of self-satisfaction began to swirl like clockwork. The glasses clinked, the shoes came off, and someone put on a playlist labeled Boardroom Hits. I wish I was kidding. What a trip, muttered Jerry from Product Strategy, already on his 3rd refill. And that presentation was perfect. I swear, Meredith, you could sell a toaster to Tesla. Meredith, my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was sitting like royalty, with one heel under her, drinking slowly from a tall, thin glass. She reveled in the attention, the smiles, the pats on the shoulder, not a mention of the runway, not a glance towards the empty seat, just careful laughter and a forward momentum, as if nothing had happened. Her phone vibrated. She ignored it. Her eyes were fixed on the onboard screen that reflected her presentation, now on a loop and muted. Then it vibrated again, more insistent. This time she looked at the screen, rolled her eyes and answered with the sharp tone she reserved for anyone who did not have a title. Meredith, the voice on the other side, did not wait. It was serious, dry and not at all funny. I am Alan. We are seeing movement in the secondary market. She blinked. What kind of movement? A legal exit. Someone just filed resignation documents from Viant Techapi Holdings linked directly to the patents you presented this morning. She straightened up. We do not know the name, but it is marked as the co-author of the entire intellectual property framework, not just as a supervisor. Authorship. Do you understand what I am saying? There was a moment of silence. So, your husband is the one you left on the ground today, right? That guy, who is he? Her hand trembled slightly, enough for the glass to tilt and a few drops to fall on the back of her wrist. Opposite her, someone finally noticed the change in her face. Mark, the only board member with the slightest knowledge of the legal infrastructure, leaned forward, narrowing his eyes as if trying to read a contract from memory. He was in the intellectual property chain, he said, mostly to himself. Wait, your husband. She covered the microphone and hissed. No, he was just a consultant at the beginning. He did not stay involved. Mark raised an eyebrow. So why is he listed in the authorship clause of the patents? That trust name is not. It is not. She snapped. On the other side, Alan continued with a tense voice. Now we need clarity, because if that resignation activates the revocation of the clause, your entire licensing model is compromised and your silence right now is not helping. I will call you back, she said, and ended the call before he could protest. The cabin had become strangely silent. No music, no jokes, just the soft hum of the altitude and the silent calculations being made in real time. Someone coughed. Another board member, Tracy from marketing, broke the silence. Wait, are you telling me your husband just opted out of our intellectual property structure and none of us even knew he was in it? Meredith's jaw tensed. It is complicated. Tracy laughed once. A hollow sound. You just presented an AI integration built on a license you no longer control. We promised a 5-year roadmap to investors on something that might not legally exist. That is not confirmed, Meredith snapped. But the air had changed completely. No one seemed relaxed now. No one was drinking anything. The phones came out, the keyboards clicked, Mark's frown deepened even more, and then the first headline arrived. Someone showed her their screen. Viantechapi Holdings legal partner resigns. Impact on licensing under review. Meredith looked at it as if it were written in a language she had never learned, and perhaps it was because she had not read the contract. Not the real one. Not the one I drafted, signed and buried where only the smart ones would look for what it meant. Not her. At midnight, the boardroom looked like a war bunker lit by IPSATs and overpriced laptops. The half-eaten sushi sweated under the fluorescent lights. The jackets had been abandoned. The ties were crooked. Tracy was walking barefoot with her heels in one hand, cursing under her breath as if it were a new cardio routine. Meredith was standing at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes fixed on a projection that no one wanted to keep reading. They had called the legal compliance department, external advisors, and 2 panic-stricken venture capital representatives in less than an hour. Everyone kept saying the same thing. He could not have done it, not without our knowledge, not without leaving a trace. But he did, and he did not because no one had ever thought of challenging the silence. At exactly 12:03 in the morning, everyone received the same email. The subject was sterile, clinical. Subject, Clause 7.4, Consequences of Authorship Resignation. The body of the message was worse. According to the foundational agreement filed under the original patent sequence dated 2012 and revised under silent amendments in 2016, the resignation of a class author signatory by the trust entity 4B93 triggers the automatic suspension and revocation of the associated intellectual property licensing rights within 72 hours. The following assets are affected: VTX Central Framework, Neuroband Predictive Engine, Elixos Embedded Systems Suite. All licenses must cease their use within the revocation period or face penalties for non-compliance, according to Section 2 of February 11th of the International Compliance Statute, 4IP7. Tracy sat down with a thud. Mark covered his mouth with his hand. Jerry, the brave and stupid Jerry, asked, "Can't we just pay a fee to reverse it?" Their lead lawyer, connected from his vacation home in Jackson Hole, slowly shook his head. This clause was built as a kill switch. There is no reversal mechanism. You guys did not build one. I did not even know it had a mechanism, hissed Meredith with her eyes on fire. The lawyer was silent for a moment. Then you did not read the addendum attached to the patents. That is where the name of the trust resides, is the author. The author was him. You all approved it without due diligence. A silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of someone knocking over a coffee cup. Mark finally asked, "What if we do not comply with lawsuits, cease and desist orders? You will be infringing on intellectual property the moment the 72-hour window closes. Investors will withdraw, clients will pivot. Effectively, you are illegally occupying technology you no longer own. 3 of our 5 current contracts are based on those assets," whispered Meredith. "Half of our roadmap, our 4th quarter earnings." The lawyer nodded. "And they will be publishing releases about delays, perhaps product recalls. You will be lucky if the stock only goes down." She did not sit down, did not breathe for a moment, just went out into the hallway, to the 18th floor terrace of the building. The cold air slapped her face like a punishment. She dialed, not her assistant, not the legal department, me. 3 tones. Then voicemail. She tried again. The same. And again still nothing. She wrote a message. "We have to talk. This is not funny." No response. So she tried with a voice note. Her voice broke halfway through. "I do not know what this is or what you were trying to prove, but if it was about the runway, if you felt humiliated, then it is okay. Yell at me, punish me, whatever. But do not destroy everything, please. We can fix this. Call me." She sent it. Read without response. She stared at the screen for a long time with her thumbs trembling, until her reflection in the black mirror of the phone surprised her. She looked like a stranger, a strange, tired and empty stranger, wrapped in synthetic silk and apologies that were already too late. Inside, the team had moved on to drafting crisis language for shareholder communications. Phrases like unexpected transition and temporary disruption. The kind of words that say we are bleeding, but we are trying not to let it show. She did not go back in. She did not need to. She knew what came next. Because this was not just a clause, it was a countdown. In the morning, Meredith had already had 3 espressos and was walking around her home office like a wild executive. Her designer heels clattered on the marble like a metronome, marking the countdown to a death sentence. The sunlight through the windows did not soften anything. It only exposed the cracks she had managed to hide in the boardrooms. She was not used to being the one struggling to find a foothold. She was used to being called, not ignored, and certainly not outmaneuvered. She opened her old contact list, names she had not touched in years, consultants, advisors, legal strategists she had inherited through him, men and women who once dropped everything when her husband called, but who never answered her emails unless he was CC'd. Now she was alone. First she tried with Marcus, the old intellectual property litigator who used to play chess with him after work. No response. Then came the compliance auditor from Zurich, whom she once called boring but brilliant after seeing him dismantle a competitor's licensing loophole during a lunch. The message was marked as read in 5 minutes. No response. She tried calling directly to voicemail. It was on the 4th call. A woman named Francesca, a retired partner of an obscure boutique firm in Brussels, finally answered. Her voice was dry, measured. Meredith, she said before Meredith could even begin her speech. I need your help. This thing that activated Clause 7.4 CU is undoing everything. Please, I just need to understand what he is doing. There was a pause. He warned you. Meredith was frozen. Francesca continued. He came to see me years ago. We went over every clause, every signature, every security system. He was not building a company, Meredith. He was building an exit. I did not know, said Meredith with bated breath. He never told me how deep it was. He tried. You were not listening. The line was cut. Meredith stood there with the phone hanging from her hand like a dead weight. That phrase kept echoing in her head. He was building an exit. She did not even bother with her purse. She just got in her car and drove directly to Virenteka's legal office in the center, almost hitting a cyclist on the way. The security knew not to stop her. She opened the door with such force that it made the frame tremble. We can fix this, she barked before sitting down. Her voice broke mid-sentence. The chief counsel, a man named Dorian, who always seemed half asleep, but never missed a detail, did not flinch. He already had the file open, a printed version with red annotations filling the margins. Are you asking the wrong question? He said, pushing a thick package towards her. The question is not, can we fix it? It is, should we have ignored it in the first place? I do not have time for games, she snapped. Tell me how to undo it. Dorian tapped the cover. The trust entity that CEO wrote these patents 4B93 does not bear his name, but his digital signature is verifiable with a timestamp, authenticated, attested, but does not appear anywhere public. Exactly, that was the brilliance. Legally, he is the architect. Functionally, he is invisible. And that invisibility is bulletproof. She sat down. Finally, the air conditioner above them turned on, filling the silence with a low mechanical hum. If he wanted to burn it all, she said slowly. He chose the perfect fuse. Dorian leaned forward. No, he did not burn it. He simply removed his name from the foundations. You were standing on them. Now they are gone. Meredith rubbed her temples, trying to ward off the headache that was clawing at her skull. Okay. So what can we do? Damage control, public messages, delaying tactics, perhaps pleading for a renegotiation from a position of weakness, but unless you can convince him to restore authorship. She looked up. That is impossible. Dorian did not argue because it was not about whether he would say no. It was that he already had. Silence is also a decision, and he had made his. Outside, her phone lit up again. Calls from investors, human resources, public relations, and a message marked as urgent from a product team in Singapore. Legal just froze the Elixos update. The partner compliance team has withdrawn. What is going on? What was happening? The tide was rising and her empire was built on sand. Monday came with the stiffness of a funeral. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, where everyone knows what is coming, but they keep sipping their coffee as if the smell of death has not yet reached their row. The boardroom lights were too bright, too clinical, and no one touched Catherine's breakfast. Not even Tracy, who once swore by sugar-based problem-solving. Mark arrived 5 minutes late and did not even apologize, which told everyone how bad things were. Meredith stood at the end of the long table, her face pale, her jaw tight, her hands clenching and unclenching as if she were both rehearsing a statement and choking on it at the same time. The screen behind her showed a control panel, red arrows, paused projects, headlines showing words like collapse, revocation, partner exit, licensing war. Let's begin, she said barely above a whisper. No one looked up. She tried again, louder. Let's start. The legal department is drafting the framework for an emergency appeal and compliance, is working with public relations as well. Stop, said Mark. It was not a question. It was an order. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. You said he was just your husband. The room did not move. I did not know he was in the intellectual property chain. She replied in a sharp, defensive, fragile tone. He never told me. He kept things. Mark blinked once, then turned to the others. He says he never told him. But tell me this, if your spouse owned the foundations of your company, wouldn't you know? Someone snorted quietly, but not enough. Then came the voice that really mattered. Angela, the newest member of the board, brought in for her image and her regulatory finesse, did not speak often. When she did, people listened. He did not have to tell you, Angela said in a quiet, cutting voice. That is why we hired you, so you would know what is in your house, what is in your past. And apparently you did not know. The words hung there. Not strong, just heavy. Meredith's hands fell to her sides. He was supposed to support me. And he did, Angela replied. Until you turned him into an accessory. Someone coughed. Jerry's phone vibrated twice. Meredith's own screen flickered with a new message from Investor Relations. Senior partner of Crawlers. Acquisition on hold. We are at concern levels here. She did not need to read the rest. She already knew. The deal with Crawl, which had been in the works for months, was set to close this week. The media had been prepared. A joint press release had been drafted, but the lawyers had detected the clause and Crawlow's general counsel. Nobody wants to buy a car without the engine. We can stabilize this, he said to no one in particular. We can negotiate directly with the trust. Perhaps waive. Tracy slammed the table with her palm. Are you listening to yourself? There is no trust without him. And do you think after the stunt on the runway he is going to be nice? Now silence again. Then Mark added, honestly, I am starting to think he never played. He built the field. We were too busy patting ourselves on the back to realize we were on his turf. That one hurt. She looked at him as if he had just twisted a knife she did not know she still had inside. I have been CEO here for 6 years, she said through gritted teeth. And I have led this company through. You led it to where? Asked Angela. To a place where a single man can pull a thread and everything falls apart. The numbers did not lie. The stock price had fallen another 12% since the weekend. Internal confidence was bleeding. Mid-level investors were already drafting exit notices. A junior legal associate quietly slid a note across the table. Succession options. Preliminary discussion points. She did not touch it. Outside the boardroom glass, the office was buzzing as usual, but inside it felt like watching a dam crack, knowing that the pressure on the other side was no longer theoretical. Meredith looked at the projection again, but the numbers had stopped updating. Even the system was giving up on her. Behind her someone whispered, Clause 14. That is what they call it. She turned. What? Clause 14. It is the nickname circulating on Twitter. Investors use it as an abbreviation for what he did to him. She looked at them with dead eyes and then turned to the window. Far below, the city did not care. The taxis were still moving, the lights were changing, people were walking. But up here, at the top of the company she thought she owned, the walls were shrinking and no one was going to come save her. It was around 2:40 in the afternoon when Meredith's phone vibrated with a force that felt deliberate, not a gentle touch, but a warning. Her assistant's name appeared on the screen, followed by a single line of text. We have a problem. Check Harvest. She tapped the link without thinking, her thumb already slippery with sweat. The silent partner who left and took the contracts with him. That was the headline. Subtitle. Sources confirmed that the anonymous co-author of Virion's patents resigns, leaving the company exposed. The old ties are deeper than anyone thought. The article was brutal, surgical. A journalist named Dahlia Gu had done what no one in her own executive suite had managed, to unearth the bones. She had obtained legal files from 12 years ago, documents linked to a private trust with phrases that exactly matched BrianTech's core architecture. She traced them to an original shell company incorporated the same year as BrianTech's launch. But that was not the worst part. Halfway down the page, between paragraphs of careful analysis and barely veiled mockery, there was a black and white photo, grainy, but clear enough. Her husband, younger, in a suit that was a little too big, his hair messier, smiling and shaking hands with Raymond Kilpatrick, the now retired founder of Brian, smiling, relaxed, standing in what looked like the original office lobby, when they still had paper posters taped to the walls and rented folding chairs. The caption, sources suggest he was not just a spouse. He was there from day one. She stared at it for a long time. Not just a spouse, no? He had been the one who introduced her to Rayond. She vaguely remembered that part, like a dream you misfile when you wake up. She had not thought about it in years. It had been a favor, a passing mention. You two might get along, he had said indifferently. She thought she had earned her place at the table. It turns out the table was his. Her inbox exploded. Investors, partners, people she had not spoken to in years. 2 news agencies wanted statements. One sent a draft headline already prepared for the next morning. CEO oversight or strategic deception. But it was the hashtag that really set it off. Tarmgate started as a joke, a meme. Someone even uploaded a short animation of a man being abandoned on the runway while a jet took off, with subtitles of Clause 14 and a fake stock chart plummeting. It went viral in an hour. In the afternoon, the hashtag was trending on multiple platforms. A parody account appeared pretending to be her husband, posting cryptic quotes from old contracts and labeling them as Clause 14. One post said, "You do not lose the game when the board laughs. You lose it when they do not know what board they are standing on." Her board called an emergency video session at 7 p.m. No one smiled. Even Tracy, who used to make nervous jokes, sat in silence. We need to discuss the image, Mark said first, using the polite euphemism that everyone knew meant you. Angela did not beat around the bush. They are going to want blood, she said. And you left the perfect photo for them to aim at. Meredith kept her jaw tight. So what? I resign, and the company magically fixes itself. No, said Dorian from the legal department, connected from somewhere in his car. But it is the only card we have left to show regret. The image of you stepping aside in the middle of a panic would at least show that you understand what is at stake. Angela intervened. Right now you look like someone who lied, was discovered, and is now bleeding investor confidence because she thought her husband was a decoration. Meredith's phone vibrated again. A message from her own mother. I saw the article. He was really involved for that long. She did not answer. The walls were not just closing in. They were being publicly torn down, mocked, memed, retweeted, quoted out of context. The investors who once begged for meetings now sent polite letters of withdrawal. And her board, the one she thought she controlled, now muttered words like succession, interim leadership, reputational firewall. All because she left a man on a runway and assumed he had nowhere to go. But ghosts do not need runways. They just disappear and take the ground from under you. She landed at the municipal airport without an entourage, without a board, without champagne, without anyone to carry her luggage. Just her, a pair of sunglasses she no longer needed, and the silence that now followed her everywhere. It was a silence louder than any scandal she had faced in her career. Because this was not public shame, it was a personal collapse. The car ride took longer than she remembered. The town had not changed much, but she had. Everything seemed smaller. The gas station she once mocked for selling single roses in water tubes was still open. The corner cafe still had the faded cash-only sign on the door. And the house, her house technically, although it had once been both of theirs, was still on the hill with the same cracked stone path and the dent in the gutter they swore they would fix in the spring. That spring never came. The gate was not locked. Of course not. He always left it open. He said it gave the place a lived-in honesty. She used to roll her eyes when he said things like that. The front door opened before she even knocked. He was there, older, calmer, wearing the same watch she had given him 7 years ago for their anniversary. She had forgotten it existed. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. At first, just the sound of her own ragged breath. I did not know, she said finally. You should have told me who you really were. He did not blink, just turned and walked into the living room, where the sunlight spilled over an old leather armchair and a bar that he once said was purely decorative. He poured a drink, 2 fingers of something dark and expensive, and did not offer her one. I told you, he said without looking up. More than once, but you laughed. She winced. I thought you were being poetic, melodramatic. No, he said, swirling the glass. I was being careful. He reached behind a stack of books on the side table and pulled out a thick, brown, discreet folder. He brought it, left it on the coffee table between them like an offering or a weapon, depending on how you looked at it. She stared at it. What is this? You already know, he said, but read it anyway. She opened the cover with trembling fingers. Inside, the complete documentation of the trust, the original patent files, the author's certifications, the digital signature records, carefully stapled to the front, a printed document titled Clause 14, Activation Conditions and Transfer Authority. She read the first paragraph, then the second. By the third, her knees gave way and she sank onto the sofa as if her bones had lost their structure. This cannot be valid, she whispered. It is validated, filed, attested. You had authority over the transfer of everything. I was the architect, not the face. There is a difference, but you let me be there. I let you be where you wanted to be. You were so focused on the image, Meredith, that you stopped looking at the structure. And the structure is what holds everything together when the image collapses. She clung to the folder as if it could somehow reverse what she had done. Why now? Why activate it now? He took a sip from his glass. Why did you leave me on the runway? That was not. She stopped. Not even she believed the excuse that was forming in her throat. It was petty. It was stupid. I did not mean to. He interrupted her with a look. Calm down, I see. You belittled me in front of your board on purpose. That was not an accident. It was a statement. So I responded strategically. She looked at the document again, her eyes scanning the numbers, the chain of custody, the fact that on paper he had more authority than she had ever had. I married a ghost, she said quietly. No, he said. You married a partner. You just stopped treating him as such. She looked up with glassy eyes. Is this final? He finished his drink. You activated it. He left the room. She was left there on the sofa with the folder in her lap, looking at the paper she never thought she would have to read. Not in this house, not from him. And for the first time since all this began, she realized that she had not only underestimated him, she had erased him. And ghosts do not forget. The morning of the shareholders' meeting felt like entering a hospital right after the heart monitor went flat. No one said it out loud, but the tone had changed from "let's contain this. Let's prevent the corpse from staining the carpet." The press was already sniffing around the lobby. A group of minor media outlets loitered near the elevators, pretending not to eavesdrop. A few Twitter personalities with the blue checkmark were live tweeting about any executive who passed through the revolving doors. One even called out to Meredith directly. "Any comment on Clause 14, miss?" But she did not flinch. She kept walking, kept her face neutral as if standing still would stop the momentum. Inside the glass-walled conference room, the board had arrived early to rehearse again. Dorian had prepared a dry and careful contingency script: unexpected personnel changes, strategic reevaluation, accelerated partnerships and new verticals, empty language built to curb panic. But the panic was no longer listening. The room filled slowly. Not just shareholders, but analysts, observers, spies from rival firms posing as consultants, and some old guard investors who smelled blood in the water and came not to vote, but to watch the collapse unfold in person. Meredith took her place at the front with the rest of the board. Powdered face, damp palms, straight back. She looked at the clock. 5 minutes to start. That is when the envelope arrived. No messenger, no announcement, just a man in a gray suit, anonymous, efficient, who approached the president, handed him the envelope, and left again without a word. The president frowned, tore the seal, read, and stopped. "Is everything okay?" Angela asked, taking a look. He did not answer immediately. He just turned pale, not surprised, not confused, just resigned, like a man who had finally found the missing page of a book and realized the end was already written. He handed the document silently to Dorian. Dorian read, then looked at Meredith. "Oh my God," he muttered. "He signed it." "Who signed what?" She snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. Dorian showed her the page: an acquisition offer from a competitor, a strategic consulting firm with aggressive branches of intellectual property acceleration in biotechnology and neural interface markets. She recognized the name. She knew the name. They tried to steal staff from her last year, and she had laughed at them. But now they were not stealing. They were buying, and attached to the offer was a signed consulting agreement with him, her husband, her ghost, the one who was now advising her biggest rival and who had just offered to buy what was left of Briant's core intellectual property at half its original valuation. Effective immediately, Dorian read aloud. Contingent on the total transfer of all affected assets within 45 days. Clause 14 recognized and accepted by the acquiring party. It was not just an offer, it was a message. He was not burning Bryantech, he was repositioning it, absorbing it, rebuilding it elsewhere, and now they could bleed slowly or sell. The boardroom fell into a terrifying silence. No one moved, no one breathed. Even the president, usually the cool head in any storm, put the document down as if it were radioactive. He did not even look at Meredith. He did not need to. Angela finally whispered. He played the long game. Meredith said nothing. The projector screen behind them still showed the meeting's agenda. Quarterly earnings, market outlook, innovation roadmap. None of that mattered now because the roadmap had already changed and the man they had left behind was already miles away. Strategic checkmate. The car smelled of stale leather and drugstore cologne. She had not noticed it at first. Her senses were dulled, every nerve frayed and trembling. Her purse was wrinkled beside her, half open, the folder with the consulting agreement still peeking out like an unsutured wound. She had not gone home. She did not even think about it. She just got into the back of a shared car, gave the address of the apartment she had not been to in weeks, and sat in silence while the driver muttered to himself about traffic and tolls. Her phone vibrated. Not a call, not a text message, just a notification from the financial news app she used to update obsessively before earnings reports. Breaking news: Virentech CEO Meredith Jison resigns amid internal crisis. Her photo was below, the one from her Forbes profile, the power pose portrait with her arms crossed, her chin high, and the caption that once said the vision behind the neural future. Now, it could have said the ghost's widow. She did not touch it, just stared. The notification faded. The silence. No one called. Not her mother or Angela. Not Dorian, not even Tracy, who once said they would ride or die together in any storm. She had ridden. She was the storm, and now she was the rubble. At a red light, the driver shifted in his seat. He looked at her in the rearview mirror. He was about 30. Cap, hoodie with the logo of some cryptocurrency startup she did not recognize. He squinted. "Hey," he said casually, as if he was not sure if it was a dream or a déjà vu. "Are you not the one who left her husband on the runway?" She looked up, met his eyes in the mirror, did not speak, did not blink, did not deny it. He shrugged, looked back at the road as the light turned green. She leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. Elsewhere, far from glass towers and investor presentations, he sat in a quiet bar lit by amber light and the low hum of the blue from a jukebox that no one bothered to update. It was the kind of place that did not ask questions, did not offer congratulations, just served you your drink, remembered your name if you came back, and left you alone if that was what you wanted. The bartender looked over. "Do you want to open a tab?" he asked. He nodded once, calm as always. "Put it in the name of," he said, Clause 14.